Ladies and gentlemen, guests of the Polish Institute of International Affairs, I am greatly honored to welcome and introduce to you our special guest today, His Excellency Joseph Borrell, High Representative of European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and Vice President of the European Commission. Well, there is no need of long introduction. Nevertheless, few words about our guest of honor. Joseph Borrell has devoted a significant part of his life to European politics. He served as a member of European Parliament, member of the Council of the Ministers, but we in Poland do remember very well his time as a president of European Parliament, in the moment when Poland has just became a member of the European Union. Joseph Borrell also served as the Spanish Minister of Foreign Affairs, and in that capacity he traveled to Poland. He engaged his time to strengthen Polish-Spanish relationship. Today, however, Joseph Borrell is paying a first visit to Poland in his capacity of High Representative, a mandate he started precisely 3 years ago in 2019. So we are very happy, sir, to have you here while we are celebrating this professional milestone in your career here in Warsaw. Well, I would like to express my gratitude, not only on behalf of the Polish Institute of International Affairs, but also all European experts and think tankers community. We write, we tweet, we talk about politicians. It's really good that from time to time we can see that we are talking about real people. People who can really make a change for our societies, who can really implement some ideas that are introduced by intellectuals, experts, think tankers. So I would like to appreciate and, as I said, express particular gratitude for your time and the contribution to strengthening this understanding between those who think, theoreticians, academicians, and those who are dealing with real life problems. So thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you to, you are taller than me, so thank you. Thank you to all of you, and in particular to you, Jacek, my former colleague, Minister of Foreign Affairs. I still have the sword that you offered me, the official sword of the Polish diplomat. It's a great pleasure to be here in Warsaw, to be in Poland. Coming from Lodz, I pronounce Lodz. You know one thing, I participated in this city in Lodz at the beginning of this century, when here in Poland you were discussing about becoming or not becoming member of the European Union, and I was a member of the Spanish Parliament. I was the chairman of the European Affairs Committee at the Congress, the Spanish Parliament, and I was invited to participate on this debate, on this Polish debate about is that a good idea to become member of the European Union or not? And then, I think it was in 2001, 2002, I went to how do you pronounce it? Which? I was exactly. I went to this town, to Lodz, and I participated in a debate with the citizenship with ordinary citizens about you were going to hold a referendum to be member or not. And I remember that at that time it was quite a certain reluctancy or a hesitancy of is that a good idea to become member of the European Union, especially among the farmers? Because the farmers said, oh, we are not going to be able to compete with the agriculture of other countries, much more productive than us. And I remember having this discussion. Finally, you decided to become member, and certainly it was a good idea. I'm sure everybody now believes in Poland that it was a good idea, because these years in the European Union, I am sure for Poland has been one of the best years of your modern history, as it has been the case for Spain. To become member of the European Union has been for us certainly a good decision, and we are here as Europeans discussing about the future of Europe, confronted again, unhappily, with a war. And I am happy to do that with, as you said, people who have time to think and to write and to read. I always wanted to put into contact the world of academia with the world of the policymakers. I myself, I spent years at the university. I got a chair at the Madrid University, but later I went to politics and I stayed there. And I always wanted to make the link between the academics and the politicians. Quite different worlds, but they need each other, but they are not enough in touch. They are not enough in touch. Politicians tend to be solving complex problems, always in the urgency, and academics are thinking, not always in strong relationship with real life. I also chaired European University in Florence, so it's a pleasure for me to be here with you. Feel free to discuss with me as much as you can. Don't expect a lot of clever answers. I expect clever questions. Where we are, or what is at stake? Well, 9 months in a war. I will always remember the 24th of February at the 5 o'clock in the morning when my phone rang. And when I heard my phone ringing at 5 o'clock in the morning, I said, oh my God, the war has started. Because usually nobody calls me at 5 o'clock in the morning. And certainly the voice tells me they have started bombing Kiev. I have to say that a couple of days before, we received a warning saying this is going to happen this weekend. This weekend the Russians are going to attack. And certainly the one who told me was right. And I'm sure that Putin was not expecting that 9 months later, Russian army will be in the situation they are now. Everybody expected that Ukraine was not going to be able to resist the strong military power of Russia, and the Russians attacking from the north and from the east. The Ukrainians would not be able to resist. And this has been the case, and we have to admire the determination of the Ukrainian people, because it's a barbaric war. There is an endless attack and a senseless destruction of a country. Russia has been unable to conquer, unable to occupy the territory. They were rejected on their offensive against Kiev. I've been in Kiev and I've seen the Russian tanks destroyed on the streets of Bucha. So they have been rejected, they are withdrawing, and now they destroy the country. Just that. They want to put the Ukrainians into the cold and the darkness in the winter, destroying the electricity system. Russia is in a purely punitive campaign. Having lost the war, in a strategic sense, I'm saying that, on the fields of battle, first in Kiev, after in Kharkiv, and then in Kherson, Then now they are just trying to create as much pain as possible on the Ukrainian. They are targeting the energy grid and water infrastructure on which millions of ordinary citizens depend. Millions are already suffering from energy blackout. I suppose you have seen these satellite pictures of the European continent, all the electricity lights, and then a big black hole, which is Ukraine. Kherson has been liberated. We have seen the images of the people receiving their soldiers, the Russians being forced to withdraw. And for me, it was moving to see how the Ukrainians were waving together the Ukrainian flag and the European flag. Today, the Kherson inhabitants still lack electricity and water, but at least they are not being occupied by a foreign army. Unfortunately, this punitive war will not stop unless we stop Putin, because everybody that goes to Russia and talks with Putin comes back saying, no way, he wants to continue the war. And this war has become a test of strength, a test of who will over time prevail. Who will prevail? Ukraine, with our support, and I have to praise Poland for the strong support to Ukraine, certainly. With our support, and when I say Ukraine will prevail, I say also the European principles of security, rules-based international system, or Putin and his dreams of an empire, because Putin wants to rebuild not even the Soviet empire, just the Russian empire, which existed before the Soviets. The idea of spheres of influence and this recovery of a former empire. That's what Putin is. It's no longer nothing to do with the Soviet ideology. It's pure, extreme nationalist ideology. In our response, I am used to be a little bit self-critical more than self-praising, but I have to recognize that we have done much more than expected, much quicker than expected, but certainly maybe we have to do much more and to continue doing what we have decided to do. Because Putin is expecting that the democracies are weak and that they will get tired. That in the middle of the winter, high electricity prices, high gas prices, people will say, well, okay, why should we continue supporting Ukraine at this high cost? That's what Putin is expecting. And we should be able to give an answer to that. And a strategic patient. We have to be stubborn. We have to continue supporting Ukraine as much as needed and for how long as needed. And you, Poland, are certainly giving an example of support to Ukraine, both in military terms, more than 2 billion euros of officially pledged support, financially, more than 1 billion euros of humanitarian support, and also your solidarity with the millions of Ukrainians that came and has been received so well in Poland. So I think that this has been a geopolitical answer from the European side, and we have to continue doing that. Military support, more than the 3 billion of the European Peace Facility. My estimation of the total military support to Ukraine from the European, in the broad sense, European institutions plus nations plus member states, is closer to 9 billion. 3 billion from our funds that we are managing in Brussels, plus European member state support through bilateral arrangements, and Poland certainly is the most important one, it is about 9 billions. You compare that with the US effort, certainly the US are doing more, but it's quite an important amount of money, 9 billion euros. Military, economically, with economic sanctions to Russia, it is something that we have to discuss. How efficient are these sanctions? I think they are. They are, and the Russian economy will pay a high price for these sanctions. We can go later in examples of how these sanctions are affecting the Russian economy, especially on the critical technological sectors that are strongly dependent from our support. Cutting our dependency from Russian oil and gas. Before the war, 40% of the gas burned in Europe was coming from Russia. Today it's only 8%. To go from 40 to 8% in a couple of months is a remarkable success. And finally, and not less important, is granting candidate status to Ukraine, plus Moldova and Georgia, but to Ukraine clearly showing a determination from the European Union to have Ukraine inside the European Union and having a plan to do this. And this will change the political map of Europe and even the nature of the European Union, which will be more and more leaning to the east. The political map of Europe will change if Ukraine is becoming a member, by its size, by its importance, by the geopolitical circumstances that we are living. So I think all that is important to notice. The European Union has reacted quickly in all the fronts, military, economically, diplomatically, and politically. So it's important to continue doing that. We have to support Ukraine until the complete rejection of the invader. And then we'll see what's happening. I'm coming from a discussion about accountability and financing. Who's going to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine? We have 300 billion euros of Russian money, which has been seized from the central bank reserves. Is it possible to use this money for the reconstruction of Poland? It's a lot of legal discussion about it, but it will be quite strange that Russia destroy and the rest of the world pays for the reconstruction. Accountability, do we need a special tribunal? It's enough with the International Criminal Court. It is also a big political debate about which is the best way of proceeding. And certainly, economically, we have to pay much more and much quicker. Apart from the military side, there is the just economic functioning of one state. Ukraine needs financial support. We have been providing about 19 billion of financial support, and we have proposed to the member states another 18 billion for next year. I hope member states will agree on that. We have been asking to the European citizens to save gas. And we have asked the member states to go and buy gas in the international market altogether, because certainly it would be more efficient. And we want to cut the Russian revenues by putting limits on the price of oil and gas. On the oil, there is an agreement on the G7, although the price of oil is already, it's below $70. And the cap will not be active because the price is below the cap. But on the cap on gas, the discussion is still very lively. And there are many important reasons, economically and technically, about how efficient it is to put a price on cap on gas. Is it possible? On there is still not an agreement among member states. And finally, the diplomatic dimension. We got 140 votes at the United Nations at the beginning condemning the attack. The last time that it was a vote, it was 143. There's still something more than at the beginning. But we don't have to believe that the whole world is supporting our position. There is in Latin America, the whole anti-imperialism, in Africa, the whole anti-colonialism, and we have to pay a lot of attention to the consequences of the war, because many countries around the world support the consequences of the war in terms of high prices of food and energy. And people say, okay, it's very bad to invade the neighbor, bad done, we certainly condemn the invasion, but look, we cannot bear the consequences. So please help us on supporting these consequences, otherwise we will be asking for the end of the war. Russia has been weaponizing food, blocking the export of Ukrainian grain. Now this is also already working, but in some parts of Africa, the lack of food is creating quite an important problem, and also putting counts on that, because more hunger, more political instability means more migration and more pressure in our borders. For him, it's also a weapon. So we have to support the rest of the world on not only understanding intellectually the problem, but facing practically the consequences. One thing is to understand intellectually, another thing is see can I bear the consequences of that? And when I talk with a lot of leaders around the world, I see that they need more support from our side. More political pedagogy, but also more economic and political support. All in all, I think that nothing has been won, but politically, morally, and even military, Russia is losing this war. He failed on the offensive against Kiev, he's withdrawing, and now morally, certainly nobody is supporting someone who is threatening with the use of nuclear arms. Even China, with this unlimited friendship that they coined some days before the starting of the war, and not following someone who threatens the world with using the nuclear arms. This is something that India, Pakistan, China, South Africa, people who are not voting in the United Nations against Russia explicitly, put the brake. Nobody wants to go to a nuclear Armageddon. But we have to continue supporting Ukraine and to develop political pedagogy to our citizenship, that we have to explain better and more to our citizens what is at the stake, why we have to support Ukraine. That's what we try to do, but certainly we have to continue in that every day, because I don't think, unhappily, that the war will be over soon. Not because we don't want. We are pushing for any possibility of stopping this war. But it doesn't look at all that Russia's Putin is ready to do so. And this is my analysis, and now I will be very happy if we could share with you. Don't ask only questions, do comments. Enrich me also with your ideas and your thinking.
Excellency, thank you very much for a very clear message. I think you outlined European Union's policy very clearly, that it is a policy about stopping Russia and its aggressiveness. You attached this aggressive Russia policy to Putin personally. You said also that Ukraine has to be supported politically, militarily, but economically by all possible means, as long as is necessary and as much as is necessary. And we also said that the European Union wants to be a leader in this process of drawing lessons out to this war, not only for ourselves, but also to the wider international audience. I have, just initial questions, and I would like to combine both of them. What this war is about for Europeans first, institutionally, for European institutions, what this war, Russia's war against Ukraine, is about for Europeans. Both our societies, because in Europe, in various corners of Europe, we can hear that it is not our war, that perhaps we should try to bring all these two sides behind the table and negotiate the solution. So we need to, as you said, educate our societies. But we also need to educate our other partners outside of Europe. Outside Europe, in Africa or in Asia, we also can hear that it is not their war. It is a conflagration between Europeans. So they should not be too much concerned about the Russia, about Ukraine, about Europe. That's a European problem. We don't want to hear about this. We don't want to pay a price. What message would you like to deliver both to Europeans and to these our friends and partners outside of the European continent? How to, educate them. Educate is not the right word. How to shape our European message to be effective in our policy at the end of the day?
Well, it's a cosmic question. It's a broad question. No? Look, for the European Union, this war has been first and foremost a test of unity. It was not so clear at the beginning that we were so united as we have been. And let's see how long this unity stays. There are some approaches, different points of view about the efficiency of the sanctions. It's not a secret that there is one country, or at least one, who is very vocal against the sanctions. It's not a secret that there is one country who is saying that the sanctions are counterproductive, that we are shooting in our foot, that we should stop the sanctions, but not many. The broad majority has been agreeing very quickly for the European standards on breaking taboos, like for example using the European Union budget to arm a country at war. People were, well, this is not possible, this is against our rules. Well, it's not against our rules, and we are doing that. And the sanctions has been taken very quickly, and I am sure that they will be renewed at the end of the year. So it's a test of unity, first thing. Second thing, it's important that from a socio-political approach, to make understand to our citizens that it's not a war between Ukraine and Russia and the West. Because Putin wants to present it, the West is attacking me. The Russian propaganda is we are defending ourselves against the West. Who is the West? West is NATO. West is US. And there is also the propaganda that says, well, the Europeans are the losers of this war. The winners are the US, the Europeans are the losers. But this is easy to discuss. This is easy to explain. That's not true. And I don't think we have a big problem in Europe. I don't think the public opinion in Europe is not supporting this effort. And a different thing is the rest of the world. And you have to understand that if you were Latin American and you know, there is a long story in Latin America about their relationship with US. And if you go to Argentina, you go to Chile, with these bloody military dictatorships that they have existed. It's not an invention. The idea that the Europeans, we use double standards, and that we are not so vocal when it's coming to other events, other situations, other regimes, that we are not so vocal, for example, with the military occupation of the Palestinian territories. This idea of double standards is present on the political debate. And if you go to Africa and you talk with some African countries, you will tell them, yes, but Russia, well, not Russia, Soviet Union supported our independence fight. So they don't see the world with the same perspective than us, because there is a historical, cultural, and geographical issue, and we have to understand them. We have to understand them, and we have to accept that at a certain moment, we too, we deregulated war. But for me, the fact that in the past we committed mistakes is not an excuse for not doing the right thing now. And the right thing is to support Ukraine. But there is no one in the world, no government in the world, who discusses the principles. Yes, it's very bad what Russia is doing. But you too did something like this in the past. And in any case, the causes are one thing, and the consequences are other thing. And people today are much more focusing on the consequences than in the causes.
Do you believe, because one of the lessons we try to take from this war is that Ukraine, as you said, is going to become a member of the European Union. Do you believe it? Because there are many, both politicians, experts, and observers who don't believe that actually European Union is really committed to this end.
Look, Ukraine will not become a member of the European Union tomorrow, not next year. But before the war, the political approach to Ukrainian membership was a completely different one from now. Now, and Ukraine has paid a high price for it, in the blood and the sufferances and the destruction, emerges a different Ukraine, emerges a country that deserved to be part of the European family, quicker, much quicker. So yes, I am strongly convinced that now there is a political commitment to do whatever is necessary in order to make Ukraine to recover from the war and to prepare for the membership.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to open the floor for comments and questions. It's not going to be one-on-one conversation. So please introduce yourself. And Mike is coming because we have also audience in our virtual world.
Thank you very much, Piotr Kaczynski from Geramek Foundation. Yes, quick question about a potential overlap between EU and US. This month there's a problem between EU and US, and what is your position about how serious it is for the strategic cooperation?
You mean about
IRA.
The economic debate on the anti-inflationary politics? Well, there are two different spheres. I don't think there is an interference between the common commitment of supporting Ukraine militarily and economically and the fact that the world is entering in a new era of protectionism. It's a trend. China is massively supporting their firms, and the sensation that in front of these high inflationary pressures, everybody is trying to support their firms. as much as they can, and certainly someone can do it much more than others because they have more fiscal capacity. And the fact that, yes, the US is supporting massively their firms. They have to fight against inflation, but by the way, they create a better competitiveness environment. And this is a different thing. I don't think that this dispute, President Macron is in the US and has been very vocal, and I don't think this dispute will interfere at all in our common commitment to support Ukraine.
Let me just follow your comment concerning European Union's membership, possible one of Ukraine.
Jacek Czaputowicz.
Yes, because maybe I visited Kiev in just a few months ago, and there are very much looking towards starting discussion about that membership, reforming administration. I know that during the war it's very difficult, but they establish a team to deal with the European Union. There is a deputy prime minister. Is there any preparation going on the side of the European Commission to prepare to these talks with Ukrainians to show them what parts of administration they have to reform? I know that it may be looked as a premature, but I think it will be good signal of determination of the European Union to go that path. And a question, if I may have the one to you, about how do you see the future of the OSCE? Because there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, but there are other countries, Central Asian countries, Caucasus, Balkan countries. I think the organization is in crisis due to that tension, due to that war. But do you see any future for that organization, and what future would it be?
Well, I'm coming from the OSCE ministerial meeting, and certainly the OSCE is the result of a moment in the history of Europe where it was a clear will of cooperation. No? Helsinki Act, the end of the Cold War. It was a moment in which everybody was willing for cooperation and peaceful settlement of the conflicts. And the OSCE is the result of this historical moment, which is completely different today. And certainly when you see that Lavrov is not present and the Russian ambassador who represents Russia is silent, well, it's no longer the fora where we can discuss. Because the discussion is not about the small differences or about the strategic approaches. It's about an existential issue like life or death. It's difficult to discuss with someone who is bombing every day a country. It's difficult to sit and talk with someone to whom you accuse of war crimes. It's impossible. You cannot take a coffee and discuss with someone to which you blame for war crimes. So we will have to wait for a moment in which the discussion could be possible. Today it's not possible. But when this moment will come, we will need the OSCE or something like the OSCE. The security architecture of Europe has been blown up. It doesn't exist anymore. But we need a security architecture. Sooner or later, we will have to rebuild it. So let's use what we have. Let's use the OSCE. Don't forget it. Maybe now it's in a kind of low speed or hibernation, but we will need an organization like OSCE. So don't let die. Don't let die.
We can have a new one.
We may have a new one, but I think that it's better to use what you have, because it has not been easy to build the OSCE. we'll have to build on what we have. I am not an Adamist saying that the story has been to be rewritten from zero. No? It's much better to use the tools that we have, even if today, unhappily, they are no longer the fora that used to be when Russia could be sitting and discussing openly. Today, it's impossible. You cannot discuss with Russia as an ordinary member of the OCE, because it's such a violation of the principles in which OCE is based that for the time being we have to keep the instrument and wait for a better time. And the first question was about. Okay, are we working seriously on the membership? Look, let's be practical and sincere. Ukraine is in the middle of an awful war. It would be a little difficult to go there and say, what about your reforms? What about your administrative reforms? In a moment when there is no electricity, no water, there are more urgent things to do. At that moment, the priority of priorities is to resist and to reject the invasion and to survive. The Ukrainians have a problem. It's survival. Survival in the middle of a winter without electricity. So the reforms will come, but first we have to win the war.
Zelensky could have responded, send me a neighbor, not the directives. I have 4 people on my list. So I will take 2 questions each time, first here and then there. Yep.
Tell me more about you in order to know who you are.
Just introduce yourself a bit. Yeah. Yes.
Bartek Znojek, I'm Latin American analyst here at this institute. So I'm happy. Yes. So thank you for your comments. Maybe I can't resist to comment that this is the leading place in Poland to foster debate on the region. And below us, in the library, we have repository of the publications of EU-LAC Foundation. So we are quite important institution about this region. And my question will be about the ideas how to make more understanding from Latin American partners on deterring Russia, because we are in an important moment. You were in Buenos Aires in October and announced very ambitious renewal roadmap for bi-regional partnership. And while one of the line of action is you promote is to promote rules-based order, democracy, peace, there's no problem in getting acceptance from the Latin American partners here, while there is problem with deterring Russia. What ideas do you see on getting that understanding, especially that you like to call that relation the other transatlantic relationship?
Yes, shorter, be much more comprehensive, if I may suggest.
Okay, so this question is: what ideas do you see in this process of renewing partnership between European Union and Latin America to make more to have more understanding on
how to promote deterrence, deterring Russia in Latin America?
Not only common principles, which is easy, but action on deterring Russia from Latin American partners.
How to talk to Latin American partners about deterrence or deterring Russia?
I don't think it's an intellectual debate, because if you have a look at the vote in the United Nations, with the exception of the 3 usual suspects, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, and maybe with the exception of Bolivia, everybody voted against Russia. In fact, the support of Latin America has been much bigger than in Africa. Our geopolitical problem is not with Latin America. Latin America, I say, forget about Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, and maybe one Central American country, and Bolivia. the big countries, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, even with leftist government, has been voting with us. Quite different in Africa. In Africa, the situation is much more difficult from the point of view of the political support of the governments. No, it's not an intellectual debate. It's the feeling that, well, yes, but in another moment of our history, we supported dictatorship regimes which were supported by the US, which is reality. It's a fact of life. And in certain media, this has left a mark. This has left a mark. And the feeling that there is a double standards, and this is a feeling. How can you fight against feelings? It's difficult to fight against feelings. It's a matter of making them to understand that whatever happens in the past, and whatever dictators like Pinochet represented in the history of Chile, today we are facing a concrete situation. And this concrete situation is a powerful country who is destroying the neighbor and threatening to use nuclear weapons if he's losing the war. And this is something that the intellectuals like you and the governments understand perfectly. So there is a long work to be done in order to make them to understand that whatever happened in the past, and certainly there are things that has to be regretted. In the past, today we face this situation, the situation of a regime which has become a danger for the world peace and security, not only for Ukrainians, not only for the Europeans, but for the whole world, because the threat of using nuclear arms is something that touches everybody. No?
And be brief, please.
Oh. Przemysław Żurawski-Welgrajewski, Political Cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Professor of the University of Łódź. I have two questions. The first one is about the future Ukrainian membership in the European Union. It's good to hear that there is strong support for that. Nevertheless, we all remember that all the EU countries are democracies, and we remember the outcome of the European Constitutional Treaty referendum in France and the Netherlands, and the Dutch referendum on Ukrainian association with the EU. And the fact that Article 88.5 of the French Constitution demands referendum to ratify an accession treaty with a large country, over 5% of the EU population. Is there any political plan to overcome those obstacles, those possible obstacles that could be created by the decisions of the citizens simply? The second question is to what an extent there is the conviction within the at least majority of the EU states that the war cannot be ended by compromise based on land for peace. What we can achieve in that way is only a kind of the second Hafrsfjord agreement as between Hafrsfjord, the end of the war based on the compromise that would grant Russia some concessions. It's impossible that would lead to next wars. I understand I have to finish.
Yes, there's anarchy in the academia. You ask one question about one question and you get two or three at once. So that's,
yes.
You cannot control it. No.
I understand, no, but I've been an academic also, and I know the immense curiosity of the academician. You know? Look, you will understand that I cannot say everything I think, but I can say things that I think. First, certainly, membership is a merit-based process, and at the end, everybody has to agree. And in some member states, the process of agreement requires a referendum. And we have a certain experience with referendums in Europe. And that's why we are so reluctant to try to change treaties. I was president of the European Parliament when France voted no and Holland voted no. Before that, Spain voted enthusiastically yes. No? So why a country vote enthusiastically yes and some days after another votes no? Because certainly there are different perceptions of what Europe is about. It was true before the enlargement, and it's still more true today when Europe is much bigger and much diverse. But no, look, be realistic. We are in the middle of a war that is going to last. So to try to make today previsions about which will be the mood of the French voters at the moment in which the membership of Ukraine will be presented to them for a decision-making process, is a futile exercise. Because it's not going to happen next year, neither the following year, neither I don't want to say the third one, but it's clear that first it has to be an end to the war. And then it has to be a process of rebuilding the country and the economy and doing the reforms. So let's see. But the only thing I can tell you, I am member of the European Union Council. I am attending the debates. So I am witnessing the debates. And it was much more reluctancy about Ukrainian membership before the war than now. Now, it's clear Ukraine deserves to be a member of the European family. And everybody will do their best in order to make it possible as soon as possible.
Now I have to ask you whether we can take 2 more questions. I know that Spain is going to play football. Had it been Poland, we would prefer probably to stay here. But as Spain is playing football, perhaps
Spain
we
is
don't
playing
have much
football
time.
with whom? I'm sorry, but I'm not following football.
So can we take 2 more questions?
With whom is playing football? Spain?
Okay, so can we? So with your permission, we'll take 2 more questions.
Certainly.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Kugiel. I'm analyst here at the Institute. I would like to ask you, yes, here. I would like to ask you about India. I would like to ask you about India.
India.
Yeah. It might seem to be a distant country, but nevertheless it is very crucial for also in the context of finding a solution to war in Ukraine. India just took over presidency of the G20 today and for the next year, and presidency in the UN Security Council for December. It has not condemned Russian aggression on Ukraine. Instead, it is increasing buying of oil and other commodities from Russia, and it will buy whatever Europe is declining to take from Russia. Europe has regarded India as a like-minded partner in defense of the international rules-based order in its strategy in 2018. So my question is, do you still consider India to be a like-minded partner? And how do you see the future cooperation with India in the shadow of the war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, India is one case, but I can tell you other cases of countries that we consider like-minded countries and they haven't condemned the Russian aggression. South Africa. Is South Africa a like-minded country? It's a full democracy. Market economy and full democracy. And nevertheless, they say that they don't condemn the Russian aggression. And when we discuss with them, they say, well, you are using double standards. The day that you will support Palestinians as much as you support Ukrainians, I will consider. And India, you know, international politics is done of values and interest. And it is in our treaty. Huh? My mandate as High Representative for the European Union is to defend the European values and interests. It's written in the treaty. And even if it was not written in the treaty, it's real life. Everybody takes into consideration values and interests. We are not an ONG and we are not a church. We are a political institutions, and politics is made of values and interests. And everybody defends both. And India, as you know, has a strong dependency and strong military dependency from Russia, no? Who is providing arms to India, no? Or Egypt, or Morocco. Morocco, with a single exception, when the moment came to condemn the referendum, then they participated in the vote, but in any other votes, they absent. They didn't participate. So you have to look at several cases in which you can consider different reasons, and you cannot pretend that everybody follows blindly what you think they have to do, because then you will alienate them still more. Senegal. I can give you a list of countries that you could have expected to vote clearly condemning what Russia has done, and they haven't. South Africa, India, Senegal, Morocco, I think are good examples of the complex reality that is international relations.
Marcin Terlikowski, Defense Analyst and Deputy Head of Research here at Polish Institute of International Affairs.
Louder, please.
Louder and clearly.
Okay.
I don't understand the Polish accent.
Sorry. Yes, I know I have a terrible accent. Marcin Terlikowski, I'm Defense Analyst here with Pisman, Deputy Head of Research. I have a simple question on how the war, how the fact that we are at the pivotal moment of European security changes, in your opinion, the thinking about the role of European Union as security and defense actor. We had the global strategy in 2016, which talked about European strategic autonomy. Then we had the European strategic sovereignty expressed in the strategic compass. And all these concepts kind of assumed that Europe has to be less dependent on US, frankly speaking. Now, we can see that it's only with the US, with a strong transatlantic bond, that we can face the challenge and provide peace in Europe, facing revisionist strong Russia. So how should we think about EU as the defense actor? Thank you.
The concept of strategic autonomy has created a lot of heat and not much thought. It creates more passion than reasons. No? And when you say about the strategic autonomy, there is immediately someone who says, and what about NATO? No? Well, that's why I'm not longer using these words. I prefer to use strategic responsibility. Because one thing is clear for me, the Europeans have to share the responsibility of defending themselves against the challenges of the world. It has to be done inside NATO, because there is no alternative to NATO for the territorial defense of Europe, and I will have to repeat 100 times. But at the same time, we have to have our own capacity to face challenges that NATO will not solve. And when I was not agreeing on everything with President Trump, for sure, but in one thing he was right. And before Trump, Obama said the same thing. We Europeans, we have to take care of our defense duties. And we have to do more. And we have to do that in a way that we could act by ourselves when nobody else will do. And there are problems in our neighborhood, Sahel, for example, which touches our security and defense and will not be solved by NATO. It will be solved by ourselves. And there are issues in which we have to engage, because NATO will not fight disinformation, a lot of cyber attacks, the new forms of warfare, in which we Europeans, we have to be more ready and more able to act, and to act together, if possible. because alone, each one on their side is a completely inefficient answer. And that's why I'm talking about strategic responsibility, because autonomy looks like I want to be a part of someone. No, I don't want to be a part of someone. I want to boost European unity, to make the Europeans work together in everything they can. Because the challenges of the world are so, they are so global that even the biggest European country is too small to face them. And only our unity can save us. And let's start working together in everything we can. Buying gas, buying vaccines, rearming, building defense capabilities. Everything that can be united will be much better for us, because the world requires an answer that each one of us separately, even the biggest, the most stronger, the richest, is unable to do. And this is what I'm calling responsibility. We have to face our responsibility. We are the richest part of the world. We have an incredible amount of capital, social, economic, cultural capital. We are not longer the center of the world. We are not longer the center of the world. We cannot have an Eurocentric approach to the world. There are emerging countries of the size of a continent that require an answer that no one of us can do alone. That's what I am preaching. No? Please, Europeans, united. United.
So thank you very much for your time and your contribution. Thank you that you found a place in your tight schedule here in Poland to share your views and to promote European Union's policy on Russia's aggression on Ukraine and on Ukraine itself. So thank you very much. I would like to use this opportunity to express gratitude for your trip to Kiev, for your trip to Kiev, because that's one thing is to send political messages via Zooms or press conferences. Another thing is to take a risk, travel to the war zone, and deliver a message on behalf of all Europeans to our Ukrainian president, to Ukrainians, to show the solidarity and that we Europeans are on their side. So thank you very much for that.
Let me say one thing. The most important travel that I made to Ukraine was not the one that I made to Kiev. In January, when the war drums were already sounding, the war started on the 24th of February. But remember, Mathieu, just after New Year Eve, when we came back to Brussels, my staff told me, look, the war is looming in Ukraine. And then I went to Donbass on the first week of January. I went there in Donbass, and I visited the front line, because it was a front line. The war didn't start on February. The war was lasting for years. Low-intensity war, but war. Trenches, tanks, a war landscape in the middle of the winter. I visited the front line. And then I had a meeting with the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister told me, the Russians will attack us. They are massing troops. It's clear that they are preparing something. They will attack us. We know that you will not come to fight on our side. We are not going to send European armies to fight together with us, because it would be the Third World War. But at least, are you going to support us? Are you going to arm us? Are you going to give us the way to defend ourselves? And I came back to Brussels with this question in mind. When Russia will attack Ukraine, will be supporting Ukraine? And happily, we have done it. It was not so sure. It was not so evident. But being able to build the unity necessary in order to put our resources, our political commitment, our military capacity to support Ukraine, I think is something that in the history of Europe will be a landmark. a positive landmark. And we have to continue doing that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our guests.